everyone's been so patient. I'm the last speaker, so please time me, Joseph, and thank you so much. And it's kind of a privileged position because so much wonderful work has been said, and I thank Paola for beginning our journey tonight. It's very important. Good, that's all there. I do want to welcome you to Wurundjeri country from Annette Giberas, who is a Wurundjeri elder, and she wanted me tonight. She's Maltese and Wurundjeri herself, and she wanted me to say hello, welcome, and may there be many learnings, and she wanted to welcome you, Paola, onto Wurundjeri land. This image is from her backyard, where she lives outside Geelong. It's the suitcases, the original cases from her father, who migrated from Malta. He couldn't read or write. He was 16, and he came to Australia to work. And that is what she calls her message stick from her Wurundjeri background with many names. Oh, I bumped something, sorry. Let me go back. I've got a habit of doing that. How do I go back? Are you there? Yeah. And that's what she calls her message stick, which is has got many carvings of names of kin and many people from her mother's Wurundjeri background. Her Wurundjeri great-grandmothers were the last women to resist walking off Kurunduk in around Hillsville when they were asked to remove themselves so that the colonisers could come. And this kind of imagery actually represents the kind of research I'll be doing with permission from the Wurundjeri people and with permission from my reference advisory group. So I'm just going to go into some of the stories. I haven't got much time, but also I want to say I've just come from Wemba country. I've been out bush, beautiful, for the last few days, so if I'm a little bit like I'm still driving, I just managed to shower and change and come back, so from a wonderful time. I also would love to put forward to everyone as the last speaker the need for this research and how do we continue this research with the US, with the Americas, in Canada, as you've said, Francesco, and is there a way that we can take this work that we're doing today to New York, to Genoa, to continue and broaden the internationalism that you've talked to us about and the work that you've already done, Paola, overseas. So maybe if we could look at that of the framework of what I'm thinking of doing, okay, and we're all doing. So this is a term that was given to me, and it is a problematic term. We're talking about language here. For some people who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander with Southern European background, and my work isn't only with Italian, it's Greek, Portuguese, Maltese and Spanish. For many, often younger Indigenous peoples, Wog is a cool term. Other people say Aborigine Wogs. And for some people, such as Calliope Koumalatsos, who's a wonderful Indigenous Greek artist, she finds that word offensive. So one of the things we need to think about is who's imposing the language, who is using that language for their own sense of identity, and how do we do this research in those decolonising ways. So what I'll be doing and what I am doing is wonderful interviews with key informants, Aborigines, ethnographic materials, photos, letters, such as the photo from Annette's backyard and the materials from her families. Lots of individual, interpersonal and family histories that I'll be working with, and looking at those intersections, the conflicts and the connections. And Paola, you spoke about those so importantly, that there was so much conflict. There was rape and sexual assaults, as I read too clearly in the Alice Springs police archives that I was given permission to. And do you know how awful and offensive and mortifying it was to read Italian men's names that I recognised, who had raped Aboriginal women as they went about making the nation. And that's the kind of ownership of some of the complicitness in our Italian coming to Australia that we need to think about. I'm going to be looking at how these relations were framed and constrained by colonial, racist and multicultural policies, perspectives and practices, and documenting strategies of resistance. This is not about the passive Indigenous person. This is about resistance and reclamation and redefinition that has been undertaken. Beautiful love stories of how people crossed diversity and connected, and as well as the stories of misogyny, sexual assault, and genocide and deprivation. So I'm going to be trying to work all of those. This work has been done before, and I want to honour the work of Peter Stevenson. The research has been done, and I love Judith Butler's terms about how do we work on the limits of the sayable, rather than perpetuating dichotomous logics. Does Indigenous and migrant have to be dichotomised? What are ways that we can explore the contestations and the connections? And who are on the borders? People who live on the borders. And I love Gloria Anzaldua's work in terms of the mestiza and the power that comes with mestizaya. And that it is not just a point of denial and denigration, but from the borders, one has insights to all concepts. One has insights because one is not invested in maintaining one particular version of self, but one can see the beauties and the problems within that duality. So Peter Stevenson has done some great work on Islam dreaming, Indigenous peoples with Muslim backgrounds, and also looked at, it's probably Paolo, your mum's background as well, the Chinese, diverse Asian and Indigenous relationships as well. Two really fantastic books. I spoke to Peter and I'm modelling a lot of my work on hers. Some of the questions I've been looking at, and I better keep moving quickly, is what was life like for Wog Aborigines in their families, communities, schools, workplaces, churches, and the wider Australian society? How did they perceive, understand, resist, or connect with Southern European migrants? One of the things that Annette tells me is that her mother wanted, if she could not be with or marry another Wurundjeri, a man, she wanted to be with an ethnic, a migrant man. She did not want an Anglo-Australian partner because there were, as you've said, points of connection around family, food, sharing, collectivisation that they did not see necessarily in a predominantly white Anglo-Australian culture. What roles did migrants play in condoning and influencing, as well as questioning racist and colonialist ideologies? What were the ramifications of this white Australian policy and multicultural policies in these relationships? And did Southern European migrants import colonial and racial attitudes? And I think, Laura, you're here from South Australia, who's doing some great work on Mussolini, the war, and the Somali people, and there you are, hello, the stolen, I probably got your name wrong, I'm so sorry.
No,
I did, I got it right. The stolen generation, where Italian soldiers who had children with Somali women, the children were then taken away. So I really thank you, Laura, for that kind of work, because that's the kind of self-reflexivity and self-critique of our cultures we need to do. Or did they come to Australia and learn those terms, such as my mother, who had only seen one black person in her little village of Squilani in Campania, who was an African-American soldier, and all the women had to hide from him because the girls were hidden. And it's really important because I think it's wonderful that we are doing this research, and I think we need to do more. However, as we do this research, I am very worried that the way we research, particularly, and I've got major problems with our academies, the moment, as I often make very clear, that we will become another form of colonisation. That as researchers we will grasp this, especially those of us who are non-Indigenous, as, oh yeah, here's some grant money, here we go, let's go into a community, get the data and go out again. This is intellectual colonialism. And I'm very deeply concerned about some of that that's happening in my university, which is why I'm kind of moving my way out, aren't I, Teresa? We've got to look at how we do this work. And I think it's very important. So, as Francesco and everyone have said, and Paula and Matteo have said, Arlene Robinson's work is very important. Standpoint research methods, where people's lived experiences are the point of entry. This is not an intellectual pursuit, per se. This is about people's lives. This is about a history. This is about ongoing issues that we need to respect and work with. Decolonising research methodologies. I think of Linda Toiwai-Smith, Māori Pākehā, in relation, how do we make this work accessible? Now, you know, some of us do love our intellectual journal writings, and that's important. It's important to get this out into the academy. But at the same time, who is going to read this work? How do we make this work accessible to the very people we are researching with? And I think those are questions we need to think about. Who has the right to speak? Who has the right to critique? So why is it important for me to get permission to do this work? And how do I do this work that I become a conduit? I don't own the stories, and I'm so grateful that Paula and I are working together on this. I don't own Paula's story, if you don't mind me saying. I'm a conduit to doing the interview, helping collect the information. It's Paula's life, it's Paula's work. I step back. And sometimes I think as academics, I do not know how to step back. We become the centre of our own research. And I find that problematic, very problematic. So these are bigger questions I think we need to ask ourselves. So the people I work with, they get the audio, the transcripts, the photos. So Annette has the whole photos that my partner Rob is working with. And I also work with the values and ethics and guidelines around research. So we have to ask some uncomfortable questions about who we are and how do we use our privilege and our educational privilege, our class privilege. These are some of the other things. Michael Savas talks about storytelling reconciliation, referring to the contribution that writers and storytellers have made and the oral history productions. Joseph Pugliese, of course, I honour your work and this really important question of decolonising migrant historiography. How many times, and I'm giving a very short paraphrase of the work you do here, but how many times do we put a monument up to Italians or to something we did without recognising the Indigenous communities, the land that we are actually putting this monument on and what happened before we all arrived. So this decolonising of historical sites and memorials is something that we all need to think about. And some of the other principles and policies that I'm working. So this is really important, and I want to point out what I am not doing. And that is not my quote, that's Annette. Coming in, having a cuppa, hanging out, and she said, Maria, we'll support your work, but don't do an Andrew Bolt on us. And definitely I will not. What the research is not doing is endorsing or supporting racist and biologically determinist constructions of what an Aboriginal person should look like, this offensive stuff about blood quantum, all those kinds of colonially imposed constructs of identity is what I don't want to take on and I'm not taking on. This is an external colonial imposition of racial identity classification, and it's unacceptable. The determinations of identity of Indigenous peoples is for them themselves, with an acknowledgement of Southern European heritage as the person feels. And this research, and I'm putting out very, very bluntly, is not about deleting, denigrating or deducting from the right of any Indigenous person to identify however they want. Right, how many minutes have I got?
Just a couple.
2, right, good. Okay, done. So what we're doing is storing, it does have autoethnographic beginnings. Those of you who might be familiar with my book Tapestry, I look at my mum, who's in the middle there, beautiful working class migrant woman, who learnt the offensive words when she came to Australia about Aboriginal people and had to take that into her work. I'm going to quit skipping. As a child, trying to connect across marginalities, having lots of accidents because I was a wild child, being in hospital next to an Aboriginal child and trying to remove the colour off her skin and see if I could put it on me, and noticing that nurses would treat her very differently to how I was treated. And my one friend in primary school was Cheryl Dawson, Aboriginal child. And it's funny, both our parents dressed us in white to fit into an Irish Catholic thing. I'm going to skip this because this is a lot of Francesco's work, the fragments of what we've got. And the histories that we do have. These are some of the people I'll be working with. Chris Sarah, the Italian father, Aboriginal mother, who has gone on to do incredible work in education and really honours both facets of his identity and his cultures. This is Jason DeSantis, a Tiwi Islander, what medical terms are transgender, but in the Tiwi Islands, gender diversity is the norm, always was, before the Christians came in and did things horribly. So, and gave me the name, and was always very thankful of both sides. I'll be working with Auntie Barb, a Muti elder from around Robinvale. Now she is the matriarch of the Egans, who are quite a footballing family apparently, and I don't know very much about them. But
she's my grandmother's niece.
great. Right.
Oh my God.
It's fantastic because she fell in love with, had sex with an Italian boy working in the Riverland around Mildura, but his parents would never let him marry or be with her, so she, yeah.
And Egan's from the Irish great-grandfather.
Wow. Yep. There's so many. I love it. I love it. The story's great. Thank you. There'll be more to do. And of course, I've got Paula's amazing work. I'm sorry I've used your. So you've talked about, and also the importance of the Rioli families. Those of you into football. The Rioli name was actually imposed, and John, I'm thinking of your work. The Rioli name was actually imposed on Aboriginal people by the Italian missionaries. They just named all the children Riolis. And the footballers, for example, I don't know which Rioli this is. I'm sorry, football fans. Cyril, thank you. Cyril has actually tattooed Rioli on his back as a point of resistance and a sense of, this was imposed on me, I claim this, and the whole family. Moving on really quickly, I thank Mattel for the story of Clelia Quayat, who fell in love with Terry Yumbaru and Elko Island, and their beautiful story. And she does not call herself Italian, she calls herself Triestina. And makes a very interesting distinction. Italy is something that is an imposition on her. She's Triestina as well as. And Francesca Rizzoli, I don't think you'll hear from SBS Italian, did a wonderful interview with Susanna Lazzaro, Calabrian, who is in a relationship, has been married to Waki and Yulnyul and Jabba Jabba Man from Western Australia, and she traces the differences and the connections. I've run out of time, but I hope in those fragments I've given you a sense of not only the significance of how these policies and procedures inform and construct and constrain and celebrate our intimate lives, but also the way we go about this work, I think, is very important. And I just want to finish on the point, I think if we could encourage lots of postgraduate research in this, it's very significant. However, Joseph, as we talked about before, we do need to be activists. I cannot see how some of this very delicate, sensitive, decolonised research can be done, sometimes within a 3-year thing that our universities are imposing on our students. And like some of us are doing, we need to get out there and speak. We need to change these policies. Because a lot of this good work will not be able to happen, and it may become another form of quick, go in, get your data, get out, which is very offensive. Thank you.